the early to mid 90s, Harley was only making about 50,000 bikes a year. And somewhere about 93, 94, we started having take orders for bikes because you'd have waiting lists. Sometimes waiting lists would be 2 or 3 years. Now, the dealer I worked at, what we would do is just you didn't put any deposit down. You gave your name to the salesman. He wrote down what kind of bike you were interested in and got your phone number. And then when the bike come in, they'd call you if you wanted it. It was like yes or no thing. So you really didn't have a choice on color. In other words, if the popular bike at the time was a Road King. So say you wanted a red Road King. Well, all we got in was a black one. You get called up and say, hey, we got a Road King in. It's a black girl. And you either wanted it or you didn't. There was such a waiting list that if you didn't want it, the next guy on the list would usually take it. Now, what some dealers were doing, they were really jacking the prices up over MSRP. So you'd have, I remember one guy in particular bought a Wide Glide from another dealer. I think a Wide Glide at the time was maybe 14, 15,000, somewhere like that. An older guy. And he has this bike and he bought it from some other dealer for like almost $20,000. And I went out and looked at it, and I'm like, man, got a set of $99 Screaming Eagle pipes on it. Slip-ons, back when Screaming Eagle mufflers were $99 for 3 or 4 different kinds. And they'd put little gewgaw, they might change the grips out or put an air cleaner cover or cheap little stuff on there. And then try to justify that, well, it costs $5,000 more than MSRP. But, it's what dealers were doing. The used bike market was pretty hefty back then for Harleys, and I don't know what happened. It was like all of a sudden thing. Everybody wanted Harleys all of a sudden. So you'd have guys buying pretty much whatever they could get that was Harley. They'd be buying, Ironhead Sportsters from whatever year, shovel heads, pan heads, anything Harley. And some of them were pretty bad. So a common complaint, a lot of times you have guys that went and bought shovel heads because they wanted to ride, not knowing anything about shovel heads or Harleys at all, really. They just, well, my buddy just bought a brand new Wide Glide or FXR or whatever, and I want it, and then they'd complain. Distinctly remember a guy had a shovel head and, not your typical biker type. So really didn't know anything about shovel heads or bikes in general. Had an oil leak. Imagine that. Out of the transmission bushing, main drive gear bushing is usually what goes out on a shovel head. It starts leaking past the main shaft seal. So explain the situation to them. That, it's not a cheap repair. It's pull the transmission, disassemble it, put a new main drive gear bushing in it, hone it to size, ream it to size, fit it to the main shaft, and put it back together. It's not a cheap repair, and it doesn't last very long. You're talking, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years maybe, before it starts leaking again, and stuff like that. And you get, well, my buddy's bike doesn't leak. Yeah, well, his is brand freaking new. Yours is 20 years old. You'd have stuff like that. You'd have, pan heads. Now, what they did is people would complain about it. Because Harley would always export like 30% of their bikes overseas, to Europe or Australia or Japan, New Zealand, South America, wherever. And that pretty much carried them through the 70s. a lot of times it's, you can thank the Europeans for keeping that alive. That other countries really, people didn't like that because they had to wait for bikes, and they'd say, "Those damn, why are we shipping bikes to Europe?" Well, because they're buying them, pretty much. Anyway, got a lot of business out of them people buying them old used bikes. It's a good deal all around for service work. And then somewhere along the lines, probably late '90s, early 2000s, dealers started saying, "Well, we're not working on anything that's older than 10 years old." Yeah, I can see that. There's a reason for that. You don't have anybody that knows how to work on them. Anyway, that's all I got. I thought I'd just go over that a little bit. Hope you guys have a Merry Christmas. Be careful out there this weekend, and Happy New Year if I don't